A joint Franco-German fighter jet project championed by Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz has failed to get off the ground. The two leaders have agreed to scrap the deal. Airbus and Dassault Aviation couldn't, it seems, set aside commercial rivalry in a project designed to help Europe rearm for a future without American support. Well, clearly there are vast repercussions on this decision. Let's bring in for some analysis on this Jeanette Süß, who's a research fellow at the Study Committee for Franco-German Relations. Jeanette, thanks very much for being with us here on France 24. We need your help on this one because looking at this from a neutral kind of perspective, as I am, it would seem that there would need to be some kind of cooperation between all parties on this kind of project because of its overall importance to the whole continent of Europe. So why has this failed to take off?
Yeah, very good question. Thanks for having me. First of all, yeah, it's one of the biggest projects, or even the biggest project that was foreseen in the European defense area. So everyone looked at France and Germany and Spain, of course, whether they would make it. But finally, the industrial rivalries were just too big. The project has been stalled for years now, so it didn't really come as a surprise as such, although there were mediation efforts being made even lately to break a compromise, but this didn't go through.
It seems a little bit depressing that these kind of interests of a company get in the way of the greater good, the global sort of need of the whole of Europe.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, we also have to remind ourselves about the context when the project came about. It was in 2017, so after Brexit. As you know, the UK is one of the main players also when it comes to defense industry. So the idea was to really ramp up the defense system of the European Union by having the bigger member states, France and Germany, at the forefront. However, what we have to keep in mind is that France and Germany are really characterized by totally different strategic cultures, totally different military cultures, and also their weapon systems. France hasn't been even in the command structure of NATO until 2009. There is really this discourse of strategic autonomy that has been adopted now by Germany and other member states over the years. But back in the day, you know, France had this whole history of independence, whereas Germany was always very much embedded in the transatlantic cooperation. So this is really the challenge here. It doesn't mean that there's not the possibility of other projects that could be sealed between France and Germany, also with other partners. We do see, for example, the dialogue that has begun in the nuclear deterrence area between France and Germany and other member states. This is definitely very promising. There's the Franco-German Brigade or other concrete projects that are definitely working.
Indeed, and one can see how that can be a very positive thing, that kind of cooperation on the ground, for instance, between the actual foot soldiers getting involved in the actual sort of nitty-gritty event of facing off with an enemy. However, in terms of giving them the hardware to do the job that's in hand, you then think, well, if there can't be a cooperation between European companies to make that happen, does that mean that Donald Trump once again is set to really cash in and profit from Europe's, let's call it, situation?
I mean, anyway, the European member states, or most of them, are still highly dependent on American weapon systems, especially Germany. And when it comes to FCAS, one of the main reasons why Germany had just, some buy-in, but not a whole buy-in, was that it just purchased 35 F-35 missiles, so the American weapon systems, and it doesn't really need this nuclear deterrence function, whereas for France, this was absolutely vital. So yes, of course, Donald Trump might look at this situation while smiling, as he can definitely see that European member states can't agree on that. However, there's other projects like the Eurodrone project, for example, a cooperation maybe between Sweden, the UK, Italy, and Germany that are being discussed at the moment. So again, we come from very different backgrounds, historically speaking, when it comes to France and Germany. On the other hand, if ever these two member states manage to agree, then we can definitely go a way forward at the European level.
Jeanette, you're right, because the difference in philosophy between France and Germany is massive. And very often, when the two get together and discuss, you can almost sense during the handshakes that there's this real sort of feeling that they don't see eye to eye. However, there's also issues such as, say, Ukraine, where they do see eye to eye, and where they're really keen on making sure that Ukraine gets exactly what it needs to continue its defence, and who knows, push on perhaps to getting the victory that most right-thinking people believe is Ukraine's to have. I'm wondering whether this, in some way, is something that could interfere with Europe's support for Ukraine. It may be there on paper, but if it's not there in terms of what is happening between the cooperation in terms of manufacturers of arms, in terms of manufacturers of hardware, if that cooperation isn't there, won't that interfere with Europe trying to help Ukraine?
Well, not directly, in the sense that the FCAS project anyway was foreseen for 2040, so really on the longer run. So it has no direct impact on the management of the war in Ukraine. I think that France especially was very active together with UK to bring forward the so-called coalition of the willing, while Germany was really at the forefront when it comes to ammunition deliveries to Ukraine. So that's, if you like, the complementarity of France and Germany. What I'm more concerned about is if ever there is a reshuffle in terms of power next year in 2027, and the Rassemblement National could be at the driver's seat. It's not clear yet to 100% whether they're gonna second the current support for Ukraine, or whether they're gonna withdraw some of their support on the French side.
Indeed, and I think, Jeanette, that is something we need to basically see how things develop, and indeed there is a lot to be decided between now and then, but nonetheless you're very, very right to flag up that possible cloud on the horizon. Jeanette Süß, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Research Fellow at the Study Committee for Franco-German Relations. Pleasure to hear your thoughts and your analysis. Jeanette Süß.